Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. We are recording this as we are about a quarter of the way through the season. We've seen a bunch of brilliant performances, a bunch of breakout players, but we're going to focus to start it tonight on our MVP picks throughout the quarter-way point of the season. I'll start with you, Tyrik. Who would you have as your MVP if the season ended today?
Would I be biased if I said Jason Tatum?
No.
That's my pick right now, man. Best team in basketball. I saw Stat News actually put out a post today, so very funny that this is the topic that we're starting with. 31-8-5, 63 true shooting percentage, 56% in the clutch, so he's leading the team down the stretch in close wins. Best player in the best team, like I mentioned, leading scorer on the best offense ever right now, and he's the best plus-minus player in basketball right now. He's been great. He's taking strides. I think he's built on what he started last season, especially in the playoffs. Like his playmaking's been a lot better. Really looking like an All-NBA defender. I would argue maybe even first team. Like he's been that good defensively. And the Celtics are winning games. They've lost 4 games this season against the Bulls and against the Cavs. Those are only 4 games that they've lost. Other than that, they've looked borderline unbeatable, against most teams. Now they haven't played like the toughest part of their schedule yet, so we'll see like when they do face some Milwaukee's and some other top teams. But right now, they're looking great, and Jason Tatum's looking like the best player in basketball as far as MVP goes.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. You pretty much said it all. As the Celtics fan, I'm sure you're probably the most knowledgeable and most qualified there, but it's just like to see Boston come into this season, losing their head coach that took them to the NBA Finals. Your starting center is out. Still hasn't played this season. Like, you expect this team to maybe take a little bit to get back to where they were last season, but they've just come out of the gate. And like you said, they've only lost to 2 teams, like 4 losses, but you've only lost to 2 teams. You're undefeated against the rest of the field. So, like, super impressive. His individual stats are super impressive. I think last season there was a lot of narratives, like every single time Jaylen Brown have a really good game, it's like, who's better, like Tatum or Brown? And, like, I think most people still thought Tatum, but people were, like, trying to sneak those discussions in. You don't even hear that anymore because Tatum's just been so dominant that it's like you're not questioning him being the number one on his own team anymore. He's being questioned as the number one in the league almost. And I know it makes my pick preseason to have him as the number one small forward in the league. I thought that was a hot take, and it took me a lot of boldness to put him over LeBron and Kawhi on that list. But, like, now that I did that, it's like that looks like my best preseason hot take.
Yeah, I mean, Tatum's definitely had a great start to the season. He's probably my guy too, although I definitely have him very close to Giannis as well. But like you guys said, you mentioned everything that needs to be said. He's taken a leap forward offensively. He looks even better defensively than he even did last year. Like you said, Tyrik, he should be in conversations for All-NBA defensive teams, if not All-NBA defensive first team. He's just doing everything out on the floor, but one of the best offensive units, one of the best defensive units when he is out there. He just shows that impact. Obviously, they're not at that level without Robert Williams right now, but Tatum just shows how much he can impact the game in every single way now, and that's just that progression we've seen over the last few years, and he deserves as much of a shout as anyone in for that award as well. If anyone wants to listen to an argument for Giannis, I'd respect that argument at this point in time in the season too, because Giannis has been equally brilliant in his own way. The Bucks are right behind the Celtics as inarguably the 2 best teams in the league right now to start the season, and he's been on a team that has not had Chris Middleton for the entirety of the season yet, and has had Drew Holiday in and out of the lineup, but Jason Tatum is definitely going to be firmly in the MVP race for the majority, if not the entirety of this season.
Okay. Yeah. I want to highlight one more name too, if I can, unless you have something else on one of them too.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the 3 I had Tatum, I had Giannis because, I mean, the cases have already been made. 2 best teams in basketball kind of look far and away to be that. But my third guy, and it does sound kind of cop-out-ish because it's just the 3rd best team in the league, but I put Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns just because the stuff he's doing this season, like if you just look at his stats, like yes, career high in scoring, career high since having like Chris Paul and Tony being a competitive team in assists. It's not just the stats that tell the story though. It's the fact that The Suns came into this season, I think we had them close to, if not in the play-in, expected significant regression from where they were 2 seasons ago and even last season in the regular season. Chris Paul has been not himself, or not his old self at least, when he was playing, and has missed time. And Devin Booker has really put this team on his back and allowed them to still be the first seed in a West that is super competitive. But now, even looking at it, like as the conference begins to kind of sort itself out a little bit, like I think literally like last week when we got on here was like maybe a game and a half difference from like 1 seed to play in. Now it's like 3.5 spots. So like as this conference begins to spread out a little bit more, I think they can continue to cement themselves at the top of that. And just with all the offseason turmoil, with all of the just negative attention going towards this team in the offseason and the way they've come in, I think he's been super impressive in leading this team to still be as successful as they were in years past.
Glad you mentioned Book. He's been so good. Like this is like clearly his best season, I think, as an NBA player. And you mentioned like Chris Paul missing time, and even when he was out there, it was like, you know, he's not going to look like what Chris Paul will probably look like once like playoffs come around and stuff like that. And with all the drama surrounding them in the offseason, we all expected them to take a step back, and they're still the 1 seed, which is pretty impressive. As kind of confusing as the Western Conference have been, they've looked pretty solid most of the season. Like a couple of their losses have been like late game situations against Portland and stuff like that. So they've looked very good, and Book has been leading the way. He's been phenomenal this year.
Yeah, he definitely has. He definitely deserves to be in the conversation as well. The 2 other guys I'll throw in the hat for the conversation right now would be Luka and Steph. Obviously,
Yes.
Their teams haven't got off to a great start record-wise, but they are the sole reasons why they are not any worse and why they are at least in play-in contention. Obviously, the Warriors have been a little bit better of late. They're facing off tonight on the 29th while we're recording this, but those 2 guys certainly remain in contention right now. Those would probably be the 5 guys I would consider most firmly in the race for the time being.
Yeah, that's kind of.
I don't really care about the team record right now because it's still very early. And like you said, Golden State's been playing a lot better lately. I think they're like 7-3 in their last 10, you know, depending on how tonight goes. And Steph has been the reason. Like he's been insane so far this season. Same thing with Luka. Like Dallas would be probably a 20-win team without Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. A lot of times, especially in recent years, it's like some of those guys on lower seeds end up getting like second or third in MVP because their stats are just that insane, and it's like they're the guy. I think the thing this season that really sets apart the top 3 for me is the fact that, at least right now, I know like Middleton's going to come back, and, you know, like Chris Paul theoretically would be like a second all-star on the team. But a lot of times it looks like, especially Giannis and Devin Booker, have been just the guy. Like they've been the star. And so it's like they're at the 1 seed at the top of the conference, and they're like the reason. Now, I know Tatum has a bit more help than the other ones, but the Celtics have just been so dominant and so much better than everybody else that still just makes his argument almost supersede everyone else's at this moment. But for me, the fact that they've kind of been on their own star-wise and at the top of the conference is what puts probably like Tatum in S tier, Booker and Giannis in like an A tier, and then Luka and Steph in like a B tier as far as MVP candidates go.
I think it's kind of impressive that Tatum's having as great of a year, and then you look at Jaylen Brown, who's quietly having a career year too. Like, kind of insane to look at that. Like JB's averaging 26 points, having the best start to a season of his career. So it's great to see those 2 guys like both playing so well. But I think that's even more impressive on Tatum's part that he's elevated his game in all, you know, facets, both on offensive and defensive sides of the floor. And he's still having such a great season. Like you said, Gabe, like the Celtics have just been so dominant this year. Like it's been kind of scary that, you know, Robert Williams hasn't even played yet, because what this team could look like at full strength, you know, is just something that I can't wait to see personally as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, that Boston offense is just full of a bunch of career years right now. I mean, obviously you talk about Tatum and Brown, and obviously not a career year, but Brogdon's giving you a ton of production off the bench, and Grant Williams is continuing to shoot very well, and Derek White has just became this really good 3-point shooter out of nowhere, and Sam Hauser has emerged, and everything's just clicking in that Boston offense right now, and Jason Tatum is the biggest reason for that, no doubt.
Yeah, it definitely starts at the top with them. And like I said, kind of some of that offseason adversity they've had to overcome at the same time. It's like it just puts the cherry on top of an already impressive campaign.
I'm glad we didn't go with the Anthony Edwards pick.
Bro, that was you guys. I was saying
both.
you guys were so like he looked so good. I'm just like a guy that's already kind of inconsistent coming into a new team situation. Like it just, I thought he would be really good, probably even better than he's been now, but not MVP yet. I definitely thought that was a reach. Was a bit of a skeptic. So if you guys had actually gone with that, I probably would have called you guys insane.
I think we're going to be entering the territory with Edwards like we did with Tatum, at least more so a year or two ago now, where we see the flashes, we just need the consistency. Obviously, he's not where Tatum has been over the last couple of years defensively or even as a playmaker, but most importantly, just for him is can we get that consistency? Because we get the 12 of 20 for 35, and then we get the 7 of 21 the next night. If we can get a little bit more balance out of that, then he can be in that conversation. But until then, borderline all-star, depending on the season of other guys around him and how good Minnesota are doing. That's definitely in play, but that consistency is just going to be the biggest thing that is a big thing for the Timberwolves and is what will allow Edwards to get a little bit more in those conversations.
Yeah, that's okay though, because I mean, I had Embiid as my MVP pick, and it's like when he's in the lineup, he's been putting up really good stats. It's just the fact that the Sixers started off the season pretty poorly, and now he's kind of in and out. Now that they're sort of starting to come around, it's like the whole team's starting to come around, and it doesn't really present as he's the reason why, because he's been in and out while they're doing so.
That's Shake Milton's team, bro. That's his team now.
I think I saw like a stat he was posted on like his stats as a starter are like pretty dang good.
Yeah, I think it was like the first 3 games he's averaging like 22, like 7 and 7 or something crazy like that. Which this is somebody that's been like in and out of rotation like the last year or so, and now all of a sudden he's back to being a big contributor.
Better without their
he's
star
had a
players.
few big games. Melton's had a few big games. Tobias Harris will have a few big games and then go quiet for a couple games. Typical Tobias things.
Yes.
I feel like if this team was at full strength, like if they didn't have all these in and out of the lineup issues, this team looks like it has a lot of pieces that could be solid. It's like obviously Tobias Harris is kind of hot and cold, but then PJ Tucker, I saw all the memes, literally putting up a bunch of 0 bombs, but still having like a pretty good plus minus while doing it and like giving impactful minutes. And then just DeAnthony Melton on your bench, like Shake Milton's been playing really well. You assume he's on the bench if they're at full strength. Just they've got a ton of pieces. They gotta put it all together.
PJ Tucker is like living proof of somebody that had to buy into a role in order to stick around in the NBA.
Facts.
Because I don't know if he was a college All-American, but I think he was like really good in college though. And now he's like you said, Gabe, he's comfortable scoring 0 points, sometimes taking 1 shot a game and just defending his tail off. Like he's comfortable doing that because it keeps him paid. So I respect it.
If I was making $1 million to do that, I'd be very comfortable.
He knows his role.
I'll just tell you that. I'll tell you that. Well, especially to uphold a shoe collection like that, which I do have to respect at the highest level, you got to be making that NBA money.
Definitely.
He'll have made himself a nice chunk of change by the end of it for sure. So buying into a role does not always mean you are sacrificing money, because he probably would have made less money if he didn't.
Hey, here's what I will say, though. I want to transition to a team that's one better than the Sixers. Ben Mathurin finally played LeBron, y'all. And he outplayed him while doing it. Give me the takes.
17-point comeback. Man.
Are the Pacers real? Because I had them as the 15th seed.
I did too. I think Devin did. I think
Yeah, I
everybody
believe
with a
so.
basketball mind did.
Yeah,
Are
Honestly.
we?
I believe so.
So are we stupid? Because I was high on Ben Mathurin, and I was like, yeah, they have a nice young backcourt. I think they found both their guys, but they're just not going to be good yet. Are we? Were we led astray?
I'm not sold on them being a playoff team. And that's not necessarily because I don't buy into this team. I just still think that there's teams below them that have more talent and or have been struggling with injuries. They are currently above the 76ers, who struggled out of the gate and have had a lot of injuries. Toronto, who have had a lot of injuries. Atlanta, who have actually looked good at times and now have gone on a bit of a losing spell. You still have the Nets in there as well. I don't know if I'm counting on all those teams to remain below them. Some of them might. I don't know if I'm buying in on Brooklyn. They might be the team that stays below them, but there's definitely a world where the Pacers can still hang out in the play-in tournament because the Knicks have been here or there. Miami still could come up a bit, but Chicago might stay down where they are. And I mean, Orlando, Detroit, and Charlotte look like they're going to be down at the bottom of the conference for the rest of the season. So there's definitely a world where they stay in the play-in tournament. They might become the Charlotte of the play-in tournament and get bullied around by a 7 seed, depending on who that is. But I think they have a legitimate chance of getting into the play-in tournament. I think they're going to remain fairly competitive. I don't think there's ever a point in time this season where the Pacers start throwing games and lose 8 in a row. But I also don't think we can expect them to continue to remain like a top 4 or 5 seed throughout the entirety of the season.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. As long as Tyrese is still playing, I think they will at least be a playing team because he's been so good. He's their engine, and he makes it easier for everybody else. I mean, he's on an historic tear right now. I think 40 assists in the last 3 games with 0 turnover, like something insane like that. As long as he's playing and they're committed to playing competitive basketball, they'll keep winning games. I think they will. And as long as they don't trade away Turner and Hield, I think that they will continue to win games. Now, do they stay where they are right now, like a 4 seed home court advantage type team? I'm not 100% sold on that. Even though we're a quarter way through the season, I still don't know if we know that like what the rest of the Eastern Conference is shaping out to be yet. Because like Devin mentioned, a lot of teams are dealing with injuries right now, which, we'll have to wait and see how they figure things out once they get healthy. So I think it's good for them that they're winning games right now, though, because that's going to put them in a better position to potentially not get into play-in later on in the season. But so far, it's just been impressive, though, because like Gabe mentioned, he had them as a 15 seed. We all had them as a 15 seed. And they're definitely overachieving, probably the biggest overachievers in basketball right now, except maybe the Jazz, but they kind of fell back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, I love Ben Mathurin, man. What else can I say? The fact that you can come into the league and not just score 19 points a game as a rookie, and not like because I know we've seen like the Blake Griffin, Ben Simmons type rookies, Joel Embiid, where you're like a rookie, and you put up big numbers, but like you've been in an NBA system for a while. No, he was at Arizona like 6 months ago, and this dude is literally dropping a dub on everybody's favorite team. Like the fact that he's doing that and doing it at a good clip, like guys don't come into the league as 20-point scorers shooting 42% dang near from 3. They just don't do that. Like that is not normal. And there's still definitely a reasonable expectation that he hits a rookie wall at some point, and that might cause the team to fall off a little bit later, and especially still doing this off the bench, so there's always that caveat. But still, this is not normal stuff. Like, to me, I'm probably giving him my Rookie of the Year vote right now. Now, is that a little bit narrative-driven? Maybe. But, like, he's just been so impressive. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
I think I still might take Paolo.
I probably do too, but it's definitely a lot tighter than I thought it would be.
Yes,
that's for sure.
What I was just thinking, for the people that bet on Ben Mathurin to win Rookie of the Year, they're holding their breath right now, man. Because I bet those odds were not crazy. I bet he was probably outside of the top 3. So
definitely,
that's a good payout. Very good payout.
Yes, I feel like top 3 would probably have had to been like Paolo, Chet pre-injury, and then Jaden Ivey.
Yeah.
Maybe Keegan Murray's in there too.
Yeah, Keegan was probably in there. Hal Jabari Smith was probably in there above him too.
Yes.
Yeah, he might have been above Ben Mathurin because I'm thinking Jabari has the kind of like Jalen Green in them with him, but at the same time, Benedict Mathurin has Halliburton. So, anyway,
I'm about to look it up. You guys keep talking. I'm gonna look it up though.
I just wanted to. I saw the funniest thing on Twitter today, and I thought it was funny because you were talking about how you think the Pacers might stay above the Nets. I was just scrolling Twitter today, and some Nets fan page was like, "The Nets team is elite. KD's winning MVP. Ben, Kyrie, KD will all be all NBA. Special second half incoming." And I know that I gave 15 minutes of Nets talk last week while I was hyping them up, and I'm like, the Nets can come back. They can really turn this whole thing around. And to my credit, they're 500 now. I think they've come back around about as well as anybody could have reasonably expected. They're doing solid things. Like the Nets have put themselves back on the right track here in the Jacques Vaughn, Kyrie is back. Ben is playing solid basketball. I know he just went out with a little bit of an injury, but I don't think that's supposed to be too major. So they're back on the right track. But KD responded to this tweet, and he said, "Nets got you in hell. You may need a break. This is going to break you, my brother."
I saw that.
Bro, even KD knows, like, the Nets are not a contender. They're not a contender.
People want to believe it just because they have KD and Kyrie, but they're way too inconsistent for me, man. Like I don't even know how to gauge this team right now. Like sometimes Ben Simmons looks very good, other nights he looks bad. I'm glad to see he's been playing better basketball lately, looking a little more like himself, but this seems way too inconsistent. Like the fans that do believe that, they're just delusional because they haven't shown me anything that I think that they could be any type of contender in the Eastern Conference, especially when you look at the top teams.
Yeah, looking at those top two, like, I don't think anybody is in that conversation with them. The closest, I mean, record-wise, is Cleveland, and I think Cleveland, just based off a consistency basis, is definitely a tier below. And it's like not even just talking about East contenders, but league contenders. It's like decisively Celtics, Bucks, and Suns for me are above them. And then I'm probably taking at least the top four in each conference as real contenders. Now, maybe there's an argument to be had with the Pacers, but scratch them, and I'm saying I'm taking the Sixers series as a contender because if they make the playoffs and they have Embiid and Harden out there, I'm probably taking that over the Nets, which I know Embiid and Harden also have their own playoff woes, but just a feeling of like how consistent the supporting cast can be. Give me Tobias Harris, I guess, but
I guess.
I mean, that's the reality of the situation, though, right? Is we're talking about a team that has KD and Kyrie, and some people have aspirations of being this contender for, and there's a realistic reality where they're just not a team that gets out of the first round. And it's tough to have any type of positivity around such high aspirations when that is a legitimate concern. Now, obviously, seeding plays into that, but even if they're a 6 seed, I'm probably not positive that they're getting out of the first round because they're probably either playing the Cavs or they're probably playing the Raptors or maybe they're playing the 76ers. And I just don't feel good about that. And like you said, Tyrik, this team just echoes a team that is inconsistent, that doesn't have a lot of continuity going, that doesn't have a lot of chemistry going, and their lineups are janky still, and their spacing is weird. This team is just a lot of mid. And there's a reason they're 500 right now. Like they have KD and Kyrie, but their actual production is just very mid. And the names don't necessarily show it, but that's just the reality of the situation. I mean, just because you have KD and Kyrie doesn't mean you're going to get there. We saw a LeBron and Kyrie duo do things, sure, but that also had Kevin Love around a lot of the time, and LeBron was a hell of a lot better than KD is, and that was Kyrie a lot younger in his career when his body was a lot more rested and he was a lot more fit and ready to go. Team was also built a lot better. Like, it's two very different situations. Just because you're going to have Kyrie and an elite scorer doesn't mean you're going to have a great situation to win. And I mean, they'll make the playoffs most likely, but anything more aspirational than that might happen, but I certainly wouldn't count on it.
Okay, I will say, to be fair, the last couple games, KD's been on like an absolute tear. Like ever since, because the Raptors notoriously in the Nick Nurse system put star players in hell. Like if you have like, especially a solo star, like they play that defense to make anybody else beat us. And so he had like a terrible game by KD standards. Since then, the last three at the time of recording is against the Pacers, against the Trailblazers, and against the Magic. He popped off. Like I don't know. He's on one of those hot streaks right now. If he doesn't come down from that soon, like the league is in trouble.
And all
the league is in trouble of them being a 4 seed.
And all credit to KD. But if he has to put up 45 points at home to beat the Orlando Magic by 7, and this is an Orlando Magic team that did not have Wendell Carter Jr., that did not have Jalen Suggs, that did not have Markelle Fultz, did not have about 3 or 4 other rotational guys. They're down about half their rotation right now. That is the problem. And so KD is what will make them relevant. KD has been very good. He's probably going to be an all-star starter again this year. He has been why this team is at least treading water right now. But that is a problem because that just isn't going to be a situation of a team that's going to have any relative amount of success long term.
Yeah, the Magic were playing Kevon Harris. I honestly did not know who that player was before that game. Never seen him on the court. Like the teams that you just named off, Gabe, it's like, that's cool and all. Like, KD should be doing that. But the fact that he has to do that for them to win, red flags. Red flags are going off everywhere. That's big-time red flags. Just shows, like, how poorly this team is constructed and just ran in general. Jacques Vaughn's done a fine job, but he's walking into just a bad situation. I like how Dev compared it to like the Cavs teams. Those Cavs teams were built way better. They were coached better. They were led better by LeBron, and just had better supporting talent all around Kyrie and LeBron. So it's just the Nets fans or the Kyrie, KD fans, whatever you want to say, kind of delusional to think that this team is going to be anything. If that keeps them interested, that's fine. That's whatever. But in reality, this team, if they lose in the first round, none of us are going to be surprised at all. I think I'll be more surprised if they got out of the first round personally.
I think it's crazy how hindsight works because it's funny, like you say, like those Cavs teams with LeBron were like so much better coached. At the time, people were literally calling LeBron the coach of that team. And it took Tyronn Lue a while to finally flip the script.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what you have until it's gone. Like you feel like sometimes you might have something and you don't appreciate it in the moment, but then once it's gone and then you're down bad, you're like, damn, I kind of missed that. And that's how the Cavs felt because they were bad for a few years after Tyronn Lue left. So they understood it. But a lot of players even before like Ty Lue popped off with the Clippers, like K Love was saying, like Ty Lue did a lot of great things as a coach, like his after timeout plays, his rotations, and just his leadership style, which I think really did not get appreciated because a lot of coaches, when you coaching LeBron James, get that stigma like, oh, he's not really a coach or he's not really a GM. LeBron makes all the decisions, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's calling KD the coach. I don't even think they were when Steve Nash was there. They were just saying they have a really bad coach.
But that's the thing, though, is like KD and in combination Kyrie arguably, at least to the public, visibly did more when they came in and got the front office and the head coaching situations changed. And then that ended up backfiring on them anyways. So not to say that LeBron didn't potentially make some decisions behind the scenes throughout the course of his career, because I'm sure he's had some level of influence. But, I mean, we visibly saw that KD and Kyrie made decisions that they wanted that then a few years down the road, we've now seen are like, yeah, no, never mind. This is not working. And, like, that goes into being well run, too, and having that leadership, like you mentioned, Tyrik, with that good leadership of LeBron. And that's just another thing that Brooklyn are missing. And it's not necessarily – I mean, obviously, there have been some big things that have been glaring drama-wise over this team, but there's a lot of small things that just accumulate on this team that just lead to a big collection of problems that are just not going to work together symbiotically.
I do think any star, though, will have that like a certain level of influence on like team proceedings. Like I think an example that comes to mind for me is Devin Booker. Like I remember reports coming out before the Suns were even good. I think even before the Chris Paul trade, maybe around like the 8-0 bubble days, maybe a little even before that, where they were like, the front office is probably going to consult Devin Booker before they make any major moves. And that's really just the reality we live in these days, where like if you're a franchise cornerstone, like not to say that you make the decisions, but keeping your franchise cornerstone happy is going to serve some sort of importance to the front office, because in today's era, if these teams make a bunch of decisions that even if they're not the worst decisions in the world, aren't fluid with a direction that the star player wants to go in, they're going to leave, and then you're going to be back at square one.
Yeah, for sure. That's a smart business at this point in time in the NBA, especially if, I mean, in any franchise really, but especially if you're not one of those top tier big market franchises. I mean, you just got to value your star players, and it is a star driven league from a revenue standpoint, from a media standpoint, but also from a production and a winning standpoint. You need to make sure that your guys, specifically your guys that you're drafting, you're bringing in and you're developing, like a Devin Booker, you need to make sure they're happy. They want to be around. They're playing with who they want to play with, especially from a star composition. And so, hey, if they hit up Devin Booker before they made the Chris Paul trade, and Booker said to him, "Wait, hold up, me and Chris Paul got beef. I don't want to play with him," that might have changed some things, right? I mean, they still might have made the trade, but at least they're going to consider it. And if they have other options, they might look elsewhere. So that's definitely the types of things you just have to consider. Now, if Jay Crowder has problems, Jay Crowder just goes home and sits on his couch and all is good because he's not your star player. But if you got a Devin Booker, you got to keep happy. That's a little bit more of a priority because that's a guy we now have an MVP conversation. Those are the types of guys that, I mean, that's the smart business decisions at that point. You got to make sure they're in the loop and they're in line with the direction of the front office.
I give the Suns a lot of credit too, because in my memory, I don't really ever remember like Devin Booker wanting out ever being a real thing other than people wanting him to request a trade. But he was like very content and he trusted the process, and it eventually paid off because now they're one of the best teams in the league perennially every year. So that's just like credit to the Suns, even though they were like really poorly managed around that time. They still, value Devin Booker enough to like console him on some things, even though there was a lot of coaching change and stuff like that. But once they got it right, they got it right really well. So it's continuing to bring them success to this day.
Yeah, I feel like it's a classic success story of like, you got to wait a second, because the Suns were in a super long-term rebuild. Like, I don't think they made the playoffs for like 10 years straight. They had the year where they were like a winning team, I think, when they had like 3 point guards like Isaiah Thomas, but the West was so good they still didn't make it. So it's like sort of a 10-year rebuild, but really they were kind of a winning team, so more like a 5-year rebuild from like 2015. But it's like it was like 2018 or so. People are like, this team is sorry. Like, Devin Booker needs to move on. Like, he's scoring 70 and this team's still losing. Like, they're garbage. Franchise is like in shambles. And it's like, let it wait. And sometimes some franchises do need to prove that they can be trusted, because a lot of franchises do get into purgatory and do get into just like basketball hell. But it makes me think of like, people were saying like Zion should like ask out after like the Stan Van Gundy hire and like some other poor moves were made. And it's like, okay, that was a bad decision, but in the long term, like, just wait, let things play out, and don't be so quick to just blow everything up and make these super drastic decisions. And while, yes, it is fun to think up mock trades and make jersey swaps and things like that, sometimes the first attempt to build around somebody might not be the best. But as long as you understand that and you move accordingly and you like continue to make moves and don't lock yourself into a bad situation like the Pelicans did not do, things can end up okay. Because now you look, in the Pelicans are the 3 seed, the Suns are the 1 seed. And these are both teams who in the last 5 years were saying, trade that team's current star player and start over because your franchise is like terrible.
That's facts.
Yeah, I mean that's just the nature of of especially Twitter these days. I mean, hell, even Paolo could have a great rest of his rookie season and say Orlando end up with like the 5th pick because of crappy lottery luck, and it'll be, oh, Orlando didn't get a good pick. They're not getting Victor or Scoot. Trade Paolo. That's just how Twitter is these days. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I got another award-based question for you guys. Take a minute to think about it if you need. Who would be not necessarily like a first-time All-Star for this year, but based on what you were expecting coming into the season, who would be your most surprising potential pick for an All-Star team if the All-Star nominations were to happen today?
I got one for each side, and I don't really need to think about it.
Okay, hit us with it.
Tyrese Halliburton. You expected them to be a 15 seed, and they're a 4 seed, and he has the best passing efficiency. I'm not even looking at stats, but just he has like the best passing efficiency in the league, if not the best up there. Still really solid scoring numbers. I think around 20 points per game, if somewhere around there, high teens maybe. And then just the impact he has on them winning games, like we talked about earlier in the episode, him being like the motor to their offense. You're the motor. You're the reason why a top 4 seed is good, and team like they expected you to be a 15 seed. Like you're literally 11 seeds higher than you were supposed to be. So that's super obvious for that side, I think, at least from my opinion. And then on the Western side, I would go with Lowry still. Even though the Jazz have fallen off a little bit, we're saying at this point in the season, nobody expected Utah to be good. They're still an above 500 team. And Lowry has been, I think, clearly their best player and has put up some very impressive stats all year so far.
I got one guy. Since Gabe mentioned Lowry, I'll mention this guy. And it's not that I know this guy obviously has all-star talent. I just don't think I expected him to be this great this season. And that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He has been insane this season. Like, if OKC was better, we'd be talking about him in MVP talks. Like, that's how good he's been.
Yeah.
31, 5, and 6 was like insane numbers. He doesn't miss in the paint. His 3-point shot has come back around. Just one of the most crafty scorers in the league. And OKC's overachieving because of how great he's been. And we knew he had all-star talent, and it was about him playing the right amount of games. He's been playing a lot of games so far to start the season. Hopefully that continues so he can make the all-star game. But it's to the point where, like, if we were voting right now, he should basically be an all-star starter. Like, he's been that good.
Yeah, he would definitely have an argument to be an all-star starter, no doubt about it. That record would be the only thing holding him back from that, and the fact that Luka Doncic and Steph Curry also exist in that conference. But like you say, he's been absolutely brilliant to start the year, putting up MVP-type numbers on a team that has been, again, as they usually are to start the year, at least a little bit better and a little bit more competitive than expected.
I got one more as well. So I also want to highlight De'Aaron Fox while we're here, because the Kings, they've lost a couple in a row now, but we were talking a little bit before the episode, I think, like not exactly bad losses, but overall, the Kings are the 7th seed, which is in the playoffs, at least traditionally like a playoff seed, but in the play-in right now. But have been, I think, better than most people expected, had that really big win streak, a quarter through the season, just doing really good things. And then, like, De'Aaron Fox, 52, 38, like 38% from 3 for De'Aaron Fox is a massive improvement already. 24 points per game, and the best player on a team that is finally in playoff contention after like 17 years not making the playoffs. So I think that has to be highlighted while we're talking about this.
Damn, it's been that long.
I am all for the De'Aaron Fox love. We know that he's definitely had a great season. Like you say, best player on the Kings on a team that is right in the playoffs, racing in that bottom side of just looking outside on the play-in tournament. He definitely deserves an all-star spot as long as he can continue to play the way he has through the first month and a bit of the season. I want to go a bit off the radar with this guy. I don't know if he'll make the all-star game, and his production might go down a little bit offensively once a few guys come back, or specifically a guy who was an all-star starter last year. But I got to give Brook Lopez some love. That's why I had to remove the first-time all-star tag, because, of course, he made one last shouldn't say last year. He made one last decade in Brooklyn, almost 10 years ago now, or 10 years ago now to the dot, which is absolutely wild. The career trajectory Brook Lopez has had is crazy. I don't know if anyone has shifted their play style more in their career than Brook Lopez has, but he has been like sneakily very productive this year in Milwaukee. He's gone from a guy who has been a very negative defender to, honestly, if I had to vote today, probably my defensive player of the year pick. He's been doing that while shooting the best 3-point percentage of his career, putting up over 15 points a game, over 40% from three, over 50% from the field. He's just doing everything for this team. He's a big reason why, alongside Giannis, their defense is so good in the paint. Of course, Jrue Holiday is a part of their perimeter defense as well. But I don't know if he'll get the nod, and especially once Middleton is back, he might get a little bit less touches on the offensive end. But from a guy who only played 13 games last year, Lopez has had a great bounce back year from injury and looks like he's playing pretty much as good a basketball as ever since he's left Brooklyn.
That's a great pick. Love that. He's averaging like 17 contested shots a game this year.
Yeah, he's been wild on the defensive end. It's crazy.
And, he's been amazing. And it's like it's good to see him like back in his offensive bag a little bit. Because there's been a couple games where Giannis didn't play, and it's like, okay, I can still post up. Like, I'm still good enough to post up. I'm not just splashing out. I can still post up and give you 28 points if I need to. Like, shout out to Brook, man. And it's like he changed his game, and he probably added like 6-7 years to his NBA career because the back to the basket big was going out of fashion, and he's like, I got to change somehow. Started shooting threes, started becoming this elite rim protector, and now we're talking maybe all-star. It's possible if the Bucks keep winning, they might get two guys in, and if maybe they get to the 1 seed, they might have 3 guys in with Jrue Holiday.
Honestly, that just gave me the idea for like a great trivia question because I feel like there has to be a guy, but I can't think of who it would be if it even does exist. But like, has there been a player that has multiple all-star appearances, but they're like super far apart, and that like they had an all-star appearance and then say like 5+ years go by and they're not an all-star, and then like they make it back to the all-star team?
Has this happened recently? I feel like either it has or it was close to happening.
Yeah, I feel like it had to have happened. I'm just trying to think.
Jrue Holiday hasn't been an all-star recently, has he?
That's the first name that came to mind for me. Was
like, I was just
Jrue Holiday.
Too, but no.
He was an all-star on the Sixers, and then I'm like, okay, he was pretty dang good on the Bucks, but
that's crazy. He actually hasn't made an all-star team yet. Not with the Bucks, at least. I mean,
that's what I mean. I wonder if there's a player like that was an all-star and then was like off the all-star team for a while. Like I think like was Blake Griffin was he an all-star in every year before that Pistons year? Because it feels like he was going through like some injuries.
I'm pretty sure he was for the most part. At least
okay. No. Blake was an all-star in 2014-15, and then according to Basketball Reference was not an all-star again until 18-19.
That's a pretty decent gap.
That's the biggest gap I can see now because that's 3 seasons in between all-star appearances, which isn't too crazy.
I was thinking like 2 separate decades, like if Brook Lopez made it this year, or Jrue Holiday made it this year, like
that's what I'm thinking.
10 seasons.
I don't want to count like you know how like Vince Carter and I think it might have been Dwayne Wade and Dirk, like they made it like their last season.
Mm-hmm.
I
think D Wade was an all-star up until like 2016. Probably.
Was D Wade? He wasn't an all-star in Chicago, was he?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say because he was still pretty deep. Like, I think he was still averaging like 20 that year. Just all popularity. I thought maybe he could have got in.
That's a good question. I don't think it's probably happened, unless it was like way before our time.
Yeah,
I feel like it'd have to be. I feel like it'd have to be like an injury thing. Like, I know it didn't happen to him, but like imagine a player with like a D Rose career trajectory,
or like
but
Grant
then like,
Hill or somebody.
But then imagine like
he made an all-star game after his injuries.
It's like if D Rose came back and then he like made another all-star game or something.
I'm gonna spend too much time looking at this now later.
I know.
I feel
I'm
like
just
someone. I
like,
feel like someone has to exist that's happened to before,
it
but I
has
don't
to
know
have
who it
happened.
is.
It
I
has to have
don't know who it
happened.
is.
It'd be the most interesting thing, like literally just a complete career renaissance.
Yeah, and there's just not many of those. I mean, it's a bit more commonplace now for guys to do that, but back in the day, it wasn't as common. But I mean, there's just not that many guys that play through complete changes in the way that the game is played. I mean, like you said, Tyrik, I mean, Rook Lopez was just a back to the basket scoring big, and now is really good at everything he was bad at. He shoots the three and is a really good rim protector, and he was a terrible 3-point shooter and a terrible rim protector back then. Like, it's just not something that you see very often.
I think a cop out answer might be like
I looked
like
it up.
maybe like was Magic Johnson an all-star in like 96 when he came back? Because
Yeah,
if he was an all-star when he came back, because he doesn't have it on Basketball Reference, maybe it was like an honorary thing.
I think it was an honorary thing.
Yeah, I would have had to been.
Okay, because I was gonna say because his last official all-star appearance was 1990-91.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked it up and it's somebody I've never heard of.
Well, that's unfortunate.
What's the name?
Frank Selvey.
Frank, so 1955 to
50s
1960.
guy. No doubt we haven't.
Oh, yeah, okay. What team is that? Okay,
I don't know.
From his
last
rookie season.
his
and then
last
7
All-Star
years later.
appearance. His
I'm
last
on
All-Star
Reddit. I'm on
appearance was
Reddit.
with
This
the
doesn't mean anything
Lakers.
about this topic.
He made it with the Milwaukee Hawks.
He played for 3 teams in his rookie season. 3 teams in his rookie season. No,
It
2
was like
teams. 2 teams in his
14.
rookie season.
There's like 4 teams back then.
Oh,
He
wait.
played for 2 teams in his rookie season.
So he only had 2
Had to
All-Star
leave.
seasons. He had 2
Yeah.
All-Star seasons. His first season, half with the Milwaukee Hornets and half with the Baltimore Bullets, which I've heard of the Bullets. I didn't know that the Hawks were in Milwaukee. I don't even know if that's the same Hawks.
I'm not sure.
I know there was St. Louis. Different times, man. This is the 50s we're talking about.
But yeah, then
Nice.
his second one on the Lakers way later. He peaked as a rookie too. His second All-Star appearance, he averaged 14 points per game.
Yeah. Yeah, he really did.
Fun
He really
fact,
did.
he's the all-time record holder for most points in a college game. D1 college, that is.
Frank Selvey, a player that none of us have ever heard of. He's got it.
This
There's
is Reddit,
no way.
by the way.
Hey, listen, there's no way that he can be good because he has a 0 3-point percentage, not one attempted, not one 3-point attempt. If you can't shoot threes, you'll be terrible in today's game.
Nah, man, mid-range assassin. Frank Selvey.
There was no mid range. There was the paint and then the rest. There's no mid.
Reddit also says, like, I think Manu had 5 or 6 years in between, and Bernard King as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, now I gotta check out.
Selvey really had a Tyreek Evans career arc just with all-star appearances on the other end.
Yeah,
it's literally what it is.
Oh, man.
Ginobili had 2004-05 and then 2010-11 were his 2 All-Star appearances. Like, that's pretty dang far apart.
Hey, he only made it twice. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
He was on the bench for most of his career. They usually don't give a lot of bench players the nod. I think that's the biggest thing is that in 2011 he started 79 of 80 games, and then in 2005 he started every game, and out of 74 played. Every single other year,
very good in 2011.
Those were the only years that he started like almost all. I mean, he started most games in like the year after in 2006, but not as high of a rate as those two. Like the two years he started the most were the 2 years he made the All-Star team. So it makes you wonder what he could have been if he did start every game. Because when he did, he was an All-Star both times.
Bernard King had 6 seasons in between All-Star appearances.
Yeah, and he missed
think
2
that
of those coming back
think-
from that knee injury. So
Yes.
Right. That and
it's a bounce back for
Ginobili.
him.
That and Ginobili are like the 2 biggest. It seems like people would know and Bernard Kings was like
Frank Selvey, bro. Frank Selvey.
My guy, Frank Selvey.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, Frank
still living.
Selvey. Hey.
Hey man, I'm really rooting for either Drew or Brook Lopez to get in, man. I want to see some historic stuff.
No doubt. That'd be
Still
crazy,
gotta be-
actually.
I need the D Rose comeback. What if like
I got to push for another Bucks All-Star appearance narrative this year now. That's the new
Imagine-
objective.
imagine a Kevin Love
Yes.
comeback? A Kevin Love comeback would be insane.
K Love was an all-star in like 2018, man. People forget.
Now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, dude, that's kind of wild that he was an all-star in 20. Like, I didn't even. It makes sense like 2016, 17 because the Cavs were like not Warriors insane, but dang near just as insane. But like 17, 18, like they were like a 4 seed, 5 seed.
It makes sense because the East was very, very watered down with talent at that time.
That's true.
That's very true.
It's crazy how much the weak East narrative has just like died overnight. Like the 2 best teams are in the East right now. And then like, I don't know, overall, depth wise, I feel a little I might feel a little bit better about East depth. I'm 2018.
Yes.
I feel like it has to be years like those years were like guys that were once all-stars that then are maybe having a solid season again. Like it has to be like when they need replacements. Like imagine if Mike Conley made one early career and then like his Jazz one was his second one.
Yeah. It was Kyrie, DeMar DeRozan as the starting guards. DeMar DeRozan was a guard. This is how long ago this was.
Well, Raptors were the 1 seed, so that makes sense.
Of course. I'm surprised Kyle Lowry wasn't even an all-star this year. Oh no, he was a reserve. LeBron, of course, Giannis, Joel, Kyle Lowry, Bradley Beal, and John Wall were both all-stars.
John Wall was him. John Wall was
Victor
him.
Oladipo, Kevin Love, Kristaps, and Al Horford.
Yeah, those forwards were weak that year.
Victor Oladipo.
All due respect to those guys, but that is not a star-studded all-star forward group that you would typically see. We'll just say this much: the Western Conference team is probably looking a lot beefier in the forward department.
You said Celtics. Al Horford was on the All-Star team.
I don't remember that. I really don't remember him ever being an all-star with us.
His first run on the Celtics, like, I don't want to say he's a better player now, but I think people are happier about his production relative to his contract and role now compared to then.
Yeah, I mean, expectations were more at the time than they are now, too, which helps.
That's fair.
I remember people memeing on him as, like, the great Al Horford.
Yeah. This is the West. Steph, Harden, KD, Anthony Davis, Boogie, Dame, Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, Russ, and LaMarcus Aldridge, and Draymond, and Karl Anthony Towns. So there must have been some injuries. That's a lot of names.
Must have been, yeah.
But was Boogie injured? Because that was the year they were on the same team, right?
Boogie was injured.
Like AD like wore his jersey. Was that the first year was that the last year of East versus West, or was that the first year they did a draft?
I think this was the draft.
Because that team discrepancy sounds like something that would cause them to do a draft.
Yes.
Definitely.
You got Al Horford being an all-star. Like, this is like Porzingis year 2. Like,
Bro, didn't they do the draft last year and the last 2 picks were Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert?
Yes.
Last year, both of the last 2 picks were West guys. But I don't think it helped that. Was KD a captain last year?
Yes.
Because I think he picked
he
his
didn't want to
teammates,
pick James Harden.
Yeah, that's what it was. I knew there was something with like who he played on a team with, and it made the picks really wonky. Oh, now it makes sense because I think LeBron just kept not picking James Harden so he could get him super late in the draft because KD wouldn't take him. I do remember now. Yeah, the GM is crazy, bro. It's not even a joke. That was calculated.
Have y'all ever just gotten bored and looked up the worst all-stars ever?
If there is an
bad
NBA
one.
related lookup, I've been there.
The worst
I have
All
been
Stars
there.
ever.
Some of these guys on the list, I'm like, how did they make an All-Star game?
I saw literally the first thing that comes up on worst All-Star selections. First couple names that come up is like Tyson Chandler, Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan. It's just like a bunch of legacy picks of like guys
Tyson
that maybe
Chandler-
weren't so hot then.
Yeah. Tyson Chandler makes sense because the center position was so watered down at that time, and he was like a defensive player of the year candidate. So I guess that kind of makes sense.
Wait a second. Tyson Chandler 2013. Wasn't that his Depoy season? Or am I tripping?
No, that's the year after Depoy, I think.
Oh,
That's
was it 2012?
That's Marcus Gasol's year, but they won 54 games that year, and he was a big reason to that.
Most undeserving All-Star selections by the Ringer. It came out because of Wiggins.
Yes, I think that's why I looked it up last year.
Yeah, that would make sense.
All due respect to Wiggins, though.
Michael Jordan.
He's probably going to be an
85.
All-Star again this year at current rates. So
he might be, honestly.
Just like this list has Shaq, Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, Kareem. There's a bunch of players that are like all-time greats. It's just those legacy appearances.
Those years, yeah. I don't like that. I don't like that. Cause it's like, I get it from a production standpoint, but like I also get why they were named All-Stars. So
Kareem made it at 41, averaging 10 and 4.5 rebounds.
Like if I'm looking at that type of list, I want to see the Roy Hibberts of the world. That's what I'm looking for.
Actually, that kind of makes sense because
it changes the game, man. Verticality.
Because Kobe, when he made it as like either a rookie or a sophomore, like I feel like his stats were not very good.
They weren't.
Kobe had a couple like that. Like Kobe at the end too. Like he made it definitely off legacy.
Shot chucker. That's all Bean was at the end, man. He was putting up his shots.
Yeah. Year two, Kobe was an All-Star. He only started one game all year, and he averaged a bit over 15 points.
Yeah,
and he was an All-Star.
15 and an All-Star as a shooting guard in 1998 is wild.
Starting All-Star at that.
Like at least in 2016, it's like the Kobe farewell tour. Like of course he's gonna get in.
Man really started as many All-Star games as he did games to the Lakers that year.
Legend.
That's crazy because Kobe led the West in fan votes that year. So if it was under the current system, he would have been literally like the captain of the team doing the draft as like not a great player that season.
I think fan votes only played like
I think it's 50% now or something like that. Yeah. Now
if he
was
captain though.
Yes. So if he still got named a starter in combination with fan voting, he would have been doing the selecting. Yes. But I don't know if he would have got in.
What would happen at that point if a player was number one in fan voting and somehow wasn't a starter? Would they just be like on the bench but still the captain?
Probably. Like imagine if LeBron won in fan voting some year and just didn't get named a starter. I mean, this year is possible. I don't even know if I have him as an All-Star right now, but he'll get in. He'll get in because of fan voting, and I'm sure they'll give him enough points to get him in because it's LeBron and they need him for ratings. But if he didn't become a starter, which unlikely, but even if he wasn't, like I'm sure they'll make him the captain. Like it's LeBron. How are they not?
Hold up.
Bias and fan voting aside and legacy aside, he's probably on an All-Star for me right now. I don't know if he stays healthy, then maybe, but if I had to name a team right now, there's one Laker on my team, and it's not LeBron.
25, 6, and 8. He's missed, 7 or 8 games?
He's played 13 games.
He's played 13, and the Lakers have played 19. So he's missed 6 games. He'd get in right now. 25, 6, and 8, and you've missed only 6 games.
Give me Wiggins, man.
He'd get in right now.
He would, but he's not on my list.
LeBron James,
but he would get in on the fan/league list.
He is a 29% 3-point shooter this season.
Would y'all vote LeBron or AD right now?
AD, 100%.
AD.
Even if LeBron had played every game, I'd probably still go AD. AD's just better.
We were mad critical of AD before the season started. Saying it's his last chance. Rightfully so. But it was like his last chance. And he's doing
exactly what he should be doing.
Career high in rebounding, 26 points per game. I think it is his career high on the Lakers and his highest since 2018. So yeah, he's doing everything he needs to do right now. Leading the league in I hate that they use this term all the time now, but it's kind of funny at the same time. Leading the lead in stocks.
Yes. Stocks.
In stocks.
Made up stat, but we like
I mean, I understand why they use stocks because it's like the combined hustle stats, I guess. So you can say it's like the hustle stat just combined because, it's like one of those things where like bigs and guards can't really compare. I mean, I honestly, assistant rebounds, like guards and bigs don't really compare. But it's like shows a combined hustle thing, sort of. I get its use in some scenarios, but it's kind of strange at the same time. I don't know.
It's a Twitter stat.
Yeah, that is the perfect description for it.
It's a Twitter stat. James Donaldson made an All-Star game, averaging 7 points.
That is some Draymond type stuff right there.
You would think, he must have been averaging like a crazy amount of rebounds. 9.8 rebounds.
What?
Don't know how more than Draymond is grabbing. So, hey, I'm just saying. I didn't watch him, so maybe he was Draymond before there was Draymond.
I'm not too familiar with his game. I'm not gonna lie.
To be fair, Roy Hibbert 2014 All-Star numbers: 10.8 points, 6.6 total rebounds, and 2.2 blocks.
It's the blocks, man. He was one of the best in the world.
And 44% from the field as a center.
44%.
Was shooting.
Oh my god, that's worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, 44% from the field as a center on literally less than 11 points per game and only 6.5 rebounds.
And yet last year, Jared Allen was averaging a bit over 16 on almost 2 blocks a game, on 1.3 blocks per game, but contesting a ton of crap at the rim and shooting nearly 68% from the field and had to be named as a replacement. Like that.
That just shows the center position.
Nah, the difference is Roy Hibbert didn't have a guard that can give him those lobs like Darius Garland. That's the difference.
Come on, bro. Okay.
Nah, 44% for any player is kind of bad, but for a 7'2" center,
I mean, how? Like genuinely, how? Like this guy is out here shooting 12-footers. Like
he was trying to shoot middies that year.
The first season he ever shot above 50% from the field as a big man was his last year in the league in 2017.
Yeah.
Different times, man. Different times.
The center position was like actually just in shambles.
That was when DeAndre Jordan was first team All NBA, man. Like
after Dwight fell off,
it's Chris Paul's
the best center in the league became like clearly DeMarcus Cousins for a couple years. Like the center position was dead because the best center in the league by like a country mile at that time literally did not make the playoffs a single time in his prime. So, like, you got into the playoffs, and there was not, like, one star center. Maybe – yeah. Like, in that era, I feel like he was pretty clearly the best center for a couple years in there.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
After, like, Dwight Howard's fall off, and it's like he literally was not in the playoffs ever. So, like, the NBA playoffs from, like, it's like 2012 to, like, 2017 just had, like, no good – I shouldn't say no good centers, but like there were not star center. Like you weren't seeing like freaking Jokic and Embiid and Cat, and even like a DeAndre Ayton level player might have been the best center in the playoffs in 2016.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird though because you say that how there was such little center talent, but like we were still in a, at least for a lot of teams, we were still in a phase where like there was a legitimate big man at power forward. Like next to Roy Hibbert was David West, and next to Marc Gasol was Zach Randolph. Like there wasn't much at the center position, but the power forward position was still all these bigs. And then eventually it was like, oh, maybe they should just all be big so we can actually have big talent in the league. And of course it all merged, but it was
I just
weird
got
how that
so many.
worked for a few
I have
years.
so many names coming to my head. Y'all remember Amir Johnson?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was going to mention him too. I liked Amir Johnson, man.
He was nice.
He was
Then
nice.
he start shooting threes out of nowhere.
He
was
did, yeah. He did.
I think of guys like Greg Monroe. That's a name.
Greg Monroe, yeah, that's another one.
I thought of Brandon Bass. Brandon Bass had the best mid-range jump shot I've ever seen in my life. I don't think he ever missed.
I definitely feel like that sometimes.
But yeah, like
Greg Monroe,
like man. I remember watching like Mike Korzemba videos in like 2016 that are like why the NBA center position is dying, and like now, like 5 years later, like the center position is arguably the best it's been since the 90s right now.
It's probably
in
the
my
top
opinion.
position talent-wise in basketball.
Like in the 2000s, obviously I'm not going to say now is better than the 90s because the 90s was like the center era. But like the 2000s, you had like Shaq. There was like a couple guys. But bro, and this is a terrible reference to make. Get on 2K right now and go to the classic teams from the 2000s. Most of them don't have a star center. And then 2010s, obviously what we've been talking about, like the center position was in hell. It was like the Dwight era where Dwight was like miles better than everybody. And then like the DeMarcus Cousins era where he wasn't even making the playoffs. And then, like Embiid was kind of starting, like some other guys were coming up, but it's like really just in the 2020s, I think it got super strong for the first time since like the 90s era kind of ended.
2000s was definitely like the power forward era. Like you had KG, Duncan, Dirk, Chris Webber comes to mind, even like a younger Chris Bosh.
Right.
But yeah, I'm struggling thinking of like good centers from that time. Like they were like defensive beasts like Ben Wallace. Shaq was, some of his prime was in the 2000s.
Right. That's the thing with Shaq is that he is like Shaq was the best center of the 2000s and half of his prime was in the 90s. Like he's a 90s center. He just kind of peaked he really peaked right around his MVP season was half in the 90s and half in the 2000s.
Different times, man. What would y'all say 2010s was? Would you say it's like guards or wings or a little bit of both?
2010s
guards. Probably
2010s. I think I'd go wings personally because just looking at like not just MVP awards, but like the top of the league, like the finals MVP was like LeBron, KD, Kawhi, and dang near every finals of the entire decade. It's like there were a lot of star guards and like some guards won MVPs, but it's like look at the players who were playing in the finals every year. Like it started off with like Kobe in 2010 as a wing, and then like LeBron and Wade as wings going every year.
Yeah, I agree with like the success was definitely found by wings, but I think there was a lot of direction shifts from a lot of teams that saw just guard heavy and guard dominated play. And there was a lot of really good guard duos between Brandon Knight and Brandon Jennings and Kyle Lowry and DeRozan and Dame and CJ and Beal and John Wall. Like, there was a lot of these really good multiple all-star backcourts where it just really started to shift to these backcourt heavy teams. I mean, even to a lesser extent, you had teams in Denver that were running Andre Miller and Ty Lawson, and that was their offense. I mean, there was just a real shift toward guard play that was a lot more dominant than it was before. A lot of those teams didn't always necessarily find success, or at least in Toronto's case, you needed that wing to win, but dominated success-wise by wings, I can agree with, but I think there was a lot of shift in how offenses were run with running it through multiple star level or borderline star level guards.
I see both
Starting
sides.
that Brandon Jennings and Brandon Knight as the first guard team to come to mind was so funny to me. But
That's a fun backcourt.
Brandon Knight. Bro, Brandon Knight was good, man. He just had some terrible moments. He was good, though. He had some really nice years. I remember there was one year, I think he got traded like mid-season, but he was basically like, he had the Bucks in playoff range, and then they traded him for like nothing, but he was averaging like 18 points. He was killing that year.
Yeah, he was.
yeah, if you look at like a top 10 players of the 2010s, I feel like it would go pretty back and forth between wings and guards because I'm thinking that list probably has like obviously like LeBron, KD, but then on the other side you have like Steph and James Harden, and then you have like
Westbrook.
Westbrook, but then you have Kawhi. So it's like kind of goes both ways. Maybe like at least in the first half of the decade for sure, like Carmelo's still pretty high up there. But then in the second half of the decade, you have like Dame towards the top of the point guards.
Top 10
John,
was from the 2010s. That's
John Wall had a really good run throughout the middle of the decade.
Blake, this might sound crazy, but Blake Griffin was really good in the 2010s.
Clippers were a great regular season team. You can put Chris Paul there too. Chris Paul was as good as Blake Griffin was. So yeah, it's like it goes both ways.
I feel like it was like a transitional point. Like I feel like when Steph really started to pop off, that's when like obviously the 3-point shot became more relevant. Guards were more so starting to dominate the league. But then in the early part of the 2010s, you know, it was the LeBrons, it was the KDs. You know, Kobe was still really good. You know, that's kind of – it was definitely a transitional point. I feel like you kind of had to split that decade in half a little bit. Like maybe like 2010 to 2014 was more so wings, and then the rest of the decade was more predicated towards the guards.
But besides Steph Curry, is having a star wing the key to winning a championship? Because looking at like every championship team almost recently, like you had Kawhi. I guess Giannis isn't really a wing, but more so like a forward player. Like, because instead of saying wing, I'll say forward because it's not really shooting guards even. Like you had Kawhi, Giannis, the Warriors had KD, LeBron. Like, it seems like championship teams are always in, besides Steph Curry, with a star forward.
Here's what I'll say. I think it helps a darn lot. I think it definitely helps. I don't think it's necessary. Now, I still think you need a wing that can get you buckets. Like, say, for example, Milwaukee was Giannis, but a guard, and he's 6'2", but is still putting up the same production. And large hypothetical, but you probably still need a Chris Middleton. You need someone who can get you some secondary buckets on the wing. Now, the biggest caveat I probably have to not needing a wing is you need a guard who can finish inside. I think if you're going to have your primary guy as a guard, but he isn't a good finisher in the paint, he can't finish in the paint at like an elite level, I think you're going to struggle. But like someone like SGA, who has a really good perimeter shot, but is also like one of the best finishers in the paint and around the rim, big or guard or wing, I think that type of guy you can get away with if OKC end up having like a borderline all-star caliber guy on the wing long term and have the right pieces around them. That you can probably get away with. Same situation with like Ja. You probably don't need an all-star MVP / caliber guy on the wing there because Ja's just so good at getting to the rim. Now, assuming he can continue to hit some threes from time to time and get a bit of a perimeter shot, that's obviously the part of the equation for him. You need someone on the wing. Like your best wing probably isn't going to be a Jeremy Grant if you're going to win. You probably need someone closer to a Chris Middleton alongside an elite caliber guard. But I don't think you need it. But there is very few circumstances where you probably don't.
Got to be a balance. I just started thinking about like teams from like the 2010s. Like the Clippers never had a wing, and that was one of their biggest downfalls. Like the Memphis Grizzlies didn't really have wing players. That's one of their downfalls. I think, you know, you could argue like the Bulls with Derrick Rose. They didn't really have wings until like Jimmy Butler came along, but then D Rose was, you know, not the MVP Derrick Rose. So wings are definitely needed, but I think you can get away with it, like not having like a perennial all-star, but like Chris Middleton's an all-star talent. Like that is like the perfect, I mean, everybody would love to have a Chris Middleton, but I think you can get away with it more so these days, man, just because of how the game is played. And not like wing players don't always have to be like an all-star type dude. You know, like you could probably get away just having some like glue guys on the wing. But if you have a star backcourt and a really good big that can protect the paint, that's a championship quality like roster right there. You know, depending on obviously who the players are, but you can definitely get away with it, man. It's a different era, and it's definitely more predicated to the guards and having a defensive-minded big these days.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess it's just like in context thinking about it versus like just in theory, because like in theory it's like star backcourt, like center who can kind of have that defensive impact and maybe he can take you all the way. And instantly what comes to my mind is the Houston Rockets. James Harden and Chris Paul, Clint Capella as your center. And it's like that was a championship quality team, but they never went to the finals because of Golden State. And so it's like they could have been the team to do that wrong.
That's
Same
fair,
thing,
but
Dame
that's
and CJ.
also the KD Warriors. Like a lot of teams fell victim to them.
Right. And even like Dame and CJ really didn't even have that great defensive center. And still it's like that team went a lot of places and was contending for a while with like the star guard. And not like they had some solid wings, like some solid role player glue guys, but they didn't have even like close to like a star wing. And they never got over the hump.
Yeah, if you're not going to have that at least all-star caliber wing alongside those all-star guards, you definitely need a perfectly built team around it. You need the solid two-way wings. You need the really good rim protecting big. And like you say, Portland have obviously just never had that. I mean, the best year they had from a regular season standpoint was when they actually had good defensive wings, guys that could do a little bit on both ends. They weren't great three-point shooters and Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu, but at least they could defend really well and give you a little bit of spacing. But yeah, I mean, if you're in that situation, you just need really good team building around that. You have a lot less margin for error in your team building if you don't have that all-star wing alongside those guards. But at the same time, getting that all-star wing isn't exactly easy either. So it's a balance of just whatever you can try to get together that's easiest at that given time, given your options and either the draft or free agency or trades. But I mean, there's a reason most teams aren't able to put it together. There's very few of those guys sitting around for every team to have when you're talking about having multiple all-star guards and a caliber wing or all the complementary pieces needed to have that perfect fit alongside your stars.
It's tough.
Yeah, I think of like Phoenix.
Go ahead.
With Phoenix, I mean, Devin Booker, like, you know, shooting guard is kind of on the wing, but less of like a traditional wing in sense of role. Like they have, like, especially on their finals run, it's like you have really good wing players, but not a star. And so it's like, yeah, that team was kind of perfectly built to where you had your all-star backcourt, you had DeAndre Ayton as your center presence, and then you didn't have a star forward, but like they were just really good and fit the team well enough to where it didn't matter and it got you there. And so like when you have a super complete team like that and like they had solid bench pieces, they had pretty much everything going for them. Like at that point it works. Or like I know Andrew Wiggins was an all-star, but like Draymond didn't play good in the playoffs last year, and Wiggins, all-star or not, isn't really like a star player. But the Warriors still went far. And I know they do have Steph Curry, so that's kind of like a whole different level of things. But they had like really good complementary, like not our best player or even our second best player. I mean, Wiggins arguably played really well, but he wasn't thought to be their second best player when he was brought there. But just like those two teams, I think recently might show that you can kind of get away from that star forward. But especially throughout the 2010s, it seemed like every team that went far had a star forward.
Yeah, for the most part. It's changing, though, man. It's a different era. Except when the Celtics make the finals again. It's still going to be a star wing player.
Well, I was going to say the Celtics got like two star forwards.
Maybe that's trying to be the new wave, too. You know, the Clippers kind of try to start that, but obviously health has been a big issue for them. Celtics made the finals doing it, so maybe that's another part of the new era as well.
I mean, if you consider Rondo the point guard, the Lakers won their title with 2 star forwards.
Playoffs, definitely Rondo was definitely running the show a lot more than like regular season.
Because like LeBron's always kind of a point guard, but I think most people still traditionally consider him a small forward. Then we know AD's not too keen on playing center, so like both of them, their roles kind of can be sort of fluid, but I would call that a star forward duo.
Yeah, they damn near played old school basketball because they ran a 5 on the floor a lot until maybe like crunch time. Then they would throw AD at the 5.
I mean, yeah, in the bubble, like AD was making every mid-range shot, so it was like kind of old school with 2 bigs, but when AD's making every outside shot he takes, like it's not affecting your spacing at all.
It's better spacing than they have right now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, they also didn't have LeBron shooting 29%, and I think for a second there, like Russ had one of the highest percentages, if not the highest 3-point percentage on the team.
God.
Crazy stat. One of the most insane stats of all time. But
God.
Yeah, that's when you know things are rough.
Russ is kind of back though. Listen, Lakers back in the 13 seed.
Back in the 13 seed. There's no way that's being said.
5-5 in their last 10. Listen.
Let's talk about them when they get up to like the 10th seed. Can we make that promise?
Hey, I gave y'all 15 minutes of Nets talk last week, and they
talked about it for like 10 minutes today too.
I know it, and they made it to 500. They did it.
Teams next week.
Yeah,
they did it.
Let's talk about the Hornets, man.
No, the Hornets are one of the teams we shouldn't talk about. What is there to talk about? I mean, I know there are some players on the Hornets that are doing some stuff.
You know what we got to talk about with the Hornets? We got to talk about how Mark Williams is still not playing minutes, despite the fact that they could have had freaking Jalen Duren, and instead he's played 13 minutes this year. That's what we got to talk about.
What did you expect? What did you expect? Who's their coach?
It's their coach. We know who their coach is. It's Vet Clifford over there.
Vet Clifford.
He's over here already playing Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier with injuries. It's not even 2 months into the season, Matt.
Can't spell Steve without Vet. That is true. What pisses me off so much about that, as a Carolina fan, Mark Williams is one of my favorite prospects, and they're just not playing him. He deserves so much better, man.
He's got 13 minutes, man. Like,
that's a
13 minutes. He hasn't played actual minutes. It doesn't make any sense.
Why is this team one of the worst teams in the entire league, and Mason Plumlee is still getting 30 minutes?
Well, that's the thing is, like, I appreciate that they're giving Nick Richards minutes because he's their guy. They brought him in through the system. I think he's year 3 now, and he's actually been, like, solid this year. He's been good. I'm glad they're giving him minutes. He's a solid backup big. But, like, time to move on from Plumlee. Give the young guys your minutes. Let Richards get 20, 25 a game. Do the same with Mark Williams. If you want to give JT Thor some of those minutes and play him at the 5, even though he's not your traditional 5-man, that's fine. But, like, how are you taking this guy at 15th overall at the position you have had nothing for almost an entire decade now, and you're just not playing him? Like, it's just a complete disconnect. It's complete disconnect from front office to coaching staff.
I'm sorry, man. Mason Plumlee, when he was good, which was like 7 years ago, he was good. He was fine. Remember him on those Blazer teams? He was like the poorest Jokic ever. Like, he was high post passing, getting triple double some nights. Like, he was cool, but he does not deserve NBA minutes right now. Nah. Sorry.
Hey, they said keep your eye on Kai Jones. Might be something soon.
Another dude that I thought was going to be really good. I thought they had another big, and only time I see him getting any type of burn is in garbage time. So,
yeah, he got some actual playing time against Boston, but like you say, that's like a game you're getting blown out in. And they had a bunch of injuries the other night. Other than that, I mean, he got run the night before against Minnesota, and that's about the only 2 games he's seen playing time. And so hopefully that's a trend. Like, he's played almost 50 minutes over the last 2 games. Hopefully that's a trend and he actually gets some more playing time. But I mean, Gordon Hayward's out right now. You also have Dennis Smith Jr. out. You also have, of course, LaMelo Ball out. You have Terry Rozier out. Like, they're down a ton of guys. So, I mean, they got Bryce McGowan's playing 24 minutes last night and Kai Jones playing 22. So,
which is
you know a team is down bad.
They stink. They suck. So just play them guys.
You know a team is down bad when we're saying, hey, Dennis Smith Jr. is out. They might be in trouble. Dennis Smith Jr. was almost out in the league. And then he
probably their best player this
year. You're in trouble. But you've got a problem.
Yeah. I actually hate that franchise, man.
Yeah.
I can't stand them right now.
Yeah.
They're going to get Victor. They're going to be the team to get
I think
Victor.
they've fallen behind the Wizards for me at this point in time of the season.
They don't deserve Victor, man. They don't deserve him.
No, they don't. Literally Victor, anywhere else
they're,
other than Charlotte, please.
They're gonna put LaMelo with Victor, be in like the play-in based on talent alone, and probably still just have terrible coaching and a bad supporting cast, and then have like a nice 3 to 4 year. They'll have a nice like 3-year run before LaMelo wants out and goes to a big market.
They barely deserve LaMelo.
And that's facts.
Yeah.
That is facts.
Speaking of the Wizards, though, Porzingis has been hooping, man. I love to see it. Had a big game last night. He's been playing some good basketball, man. Shout out to Porzingis.
Yes,
and they're still winning. And they're still winning games.
Bro, here's the problem.
They've been cool.
Listen,
cool.
here's
the not problem. Really doing anything for them, but at least they're being cool and not just meh.
Yeah.
The problem is I do not care at all because listen, because like look at every team above them. The Celtics are a contender. The Bucks are a contender. The Cavaliers, at worst, a year away. The Pacers are super young, so either they're going to fall off or they're just super ahead of schedule, but they have some like franchise pieces that you can actually see taking them somewhere. The Sixers are a win-now team with stars. The Raptors have a star sophomore and a solid core. Like, these are all teams that you can expect to progress and to go places. The only one who you don't think is like the only team where the best might not be yet to come is Philly, and they're like super win now, so of course they're above them. The Wizards, literally, this is their ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm not going to say you're wrong.
It fully is. Here's where I'm at with Washington, right? I fully agree with you. I don't really care either. But at the end of the day, this is probably their ceiling for the next 5 years. So either I have to find a reason to care, to somewhat get excited to follow this team and watch them, or I am not going to watch Wizards basketball for the next 5 years, barring some lottery luck where they jump up to a top 2 pick some year, even though they just lose in the play-in tournament and have like the 13th best lottery odds. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, the Wizards aren't going to do anything, but it's like Beal's been cool, Kuzma's been cool. KP might get an all-star game out of it if he can continue to play well, but I mean, as a collective, yeah, I mean, it's the Wizards. They got Beal there for the next 5 years, and he's in there in a jail cell locked up unless he wants to leave, which he won't. So, because they keep feeding him 50 mil every year into that jail cell. They give the biggest envelope known to mankind, and it's here, Brad. Take this. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll stay around for another year. And we're just going to do that for another 4 years, and we're just all going to be sick of Washington by the end of it. If Charlotte are still lower on the totem pole by the end of these 5 years, then Charlotte deserve to just have a complete wipe. But hopefully they can figure it out more so that they become a little bit more relevant than Washington, so that by year 5 of Bradley Beal just hanging out, eating his 50 mil every year, then at least they can have some level of relevancy.
Next trivia question.
That is
would Charlotte would Charlotte be the first team to lose a franchise twice?
First team to lose a franchise.
Or not the first team, the first city. Would they be the first city to lose a franchise multiple times?
Did they lose it once?
The Hornets moved to New Orleans.
But they replaced them with the Bobcats. Did they take time off in between?
Not instantly. Yeah, there was time off.
Okay. First.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say it's impossible. I think we're a long way away from that. I mean, they did just make the play-in for a few years, but they do still have LaMelo Ball. But, I mean, if they don't draft anyone good over the next few years, which seems improbable, I mean, they probably should get at least someone half decent this year. But if they don't get anyone decent for the next few years and LaMelo gets unhappy, that's when things get dangerous. But I think that's probably a 4-year down the road conversation. But I'm definitely not going to say it's impossible because they're not the biggest market in the world, and they certainly don't seem to be anywhere near one of the best run teams in the league. So it's definitely not impossible.
I can see them getting a high lotto pick and drafting like Drew Timme or just some 5-year college fit.
Upon looking it up, yeah. So the original Charlotte Hornets moved to New Orleans in 2002. So like 2002-03 season was their first season in New Orleans, it looks like.
I think 2004 the Bobcats came back.
04-05 is the first year of Bobcats basketball. So
I missed the Bobcats, man.
So 02-03 and 03-04, those 2 seasons had no team in Charlotte. So kind of a short. I think it's kind of like the Cleveland Browns. Like the Browns moved and became the Baltimore Ravens, and then like not very long after there was the Browns again. Which will probably, I feel like this will happen with the Sonics in a couple years, and we'll all be confused again.
Probably.
Except that was a bit bigger of a gap, being almost 2 decades. If they came back in like 5 years.
I don't. If a team has lost if a city has lost a team twice, I once again feel like it was probably like way before our time.
Yeah, probably.
I don't want to count anything before like 1965 at least. Like if somehow the Timberwolves moved, like Minneapolis has lost a team twice. But anything like before that, I'm not counting.
I can't even think of cities right now.
So I know we were talking about like the Milwaukee Hawks, so it's like I didn't know Milwaukee had 2 NBA teams.
I had no idea before this episode. Still don't think it's real, honestly.
Like maybe New Jersey had a different team, like way in the 50s before the Nets were there, and New Jersey's lost their team twice, but like who knows?
About all I know is that the Toronto Huskies used to exist, and that's as far as that goes. And that existed for 1 year, so.
Canada as a country has lost a team twice, lost the Grizzlies too.
Bring those jerseys back, man. Underrated jersey in Court.
Yeah, those jerseys were nice. I did like those.
Cincinnati lost a team 1 time.
Never got it back.
Never got it back. Hey, man, I feel like there's probably some like 80-year-olds in Cincinnati that are like huge Kings fans because they used to be in Cincinnati.
Nah, they probably gave up on them after these last.
I know in 2002, people in Cincinnati probably hated the Lakers. But
yeah, probably.
Actually, it might be the opposite. Like maybe they hated the Kings because they like stole their franchise. Because I'm thinking because I was watching a video about like how NBA rivalries don't really exist like that anymore. And whoever made the video was like, yeah, they got one rivalry in their back pocket. If they bring Seattle back, Seattle versus Oklahoma City could be a crazy rivalry. And it's like, honestly, that's true because like Seattle basketball fans, like most Sonics fans, are going to remember the Sonics being there. Because like even y'all, at least I like one of y'all are probably basketball fans in 2008. And we're in like our early 20s. So like
I started watching seriously like 2009. So that's
So okay,
Like,
so maybe right
I only
after.
remember watching OKC.
Yeah.
But anybody older than us probably remembers some solid Sonics basketball, and especially people that live in Seattle. They're probably still young enough to remember. So if they bring the Sonics back and they have somebody to root for, they gotta hate OKC. They made them not have a franchise for 20 years.
20 years. 15. Not even 15 full years.
15 now. It's 15 now, but I'm saying by the time they got a team again, they probably would be 20 years.
It's been about 14.
They're just gonna wait for OKC to be good, and then rivalry begins.
Yes.
I can't wait for the next expansion because I don't know when it'll happen, if it'll even happen, but I haven't been an active watching fan for a team for a league expansion. So I just want to see how that goes, and especially seeing I know it's a completely different sport, but the NHL did their expansion to Vegas, and then the Golden Knights went to the Stanley Cup Finals in their first season as a franchise. I want to see if the NBA gets an expansion team, will it end up being just a garbage worst team in the league, or will they mess around and find a way to be solid?
I think
it's just the coolest thing.
They did. They expanded to Seattle years later, and they adjusted the rules. So now Seattle's team is trash because they realized that they let Vegas have too many good players. Although, to be fair, when that team was drafted on paper, most people didn't think it was that good of a team. So I don't think the system was actually that bad. But it'll be interesting because, like you say, Gabe, I mean, it's been a long time since we've had an expansion. And, I mean, it's going to be inevitable at some point that we'll get one. I mean, the NFL's been at 32 teams for a while. The NHL's at 32 teams. Now it's only right the NBA is going to want to join suit and keep a level playing field there and add team 31 and 32. But it'll be interesting to see what the number ends up being on how many players you can protect on a team, because teams that have depth definitely could end up losing some decent players if they want the team to be good out of the gate.
I think it'll be really interesting too.
Players or something like that.
Yeah, but overall, just the whole league, alignment shift. You think if they say, okay, we're gonna go into Seattle and we're gonna go into Vegas, because those are probably the biggest markets that don't have an NBA team, at least they're kind of a untouched area right now. You could argue Portland kind of touches the Pacific Northwest, but Seattle's I think that's still towards the top of the list for anybody. If you get those two, all of a sudden, the Pelicans and the Grizzlies are probably in the East. And say this happens in 5 years, now you have the team of a prime Ja Morant and a prime Zion and Brandon Ingram coming over to the Eastern Conference. So if you got Seattle and Vegas in 2027, 2028, crazy league realignment. And then those that East race that year, it just get insane instantly. That's one of that's one of the biggest shakeups you could think of.
I mean, it's about to be the weak West compared to the East if that happens. I mean, you talk about the talent that's already in the Eastern Conference, and you add those two teams in a few years down the line. I mean, I don't even want to think about that. I'd be scared as a Raptors fan. That'd be wild.
It's really, I think it would be the biggest conference shakeup, if not ever. The only other super huge, this conference just got a lot different shakeup I can think of recently is KD goes to the East, and then all of a sudden, the West goes from being run by the KD Warriors to now it's the whole race of LA between LeBron and Kawhi.
Thanks. I was thinking of expansion teams, and what if the expansion teams just take all the bad contracts, and then those guys start showing out again, and then they're really good teams. I think that would be so funny. Westbrook goes back to Seattle, and he's all of a sudden back to form. That would just be hilarious.
That would be pretty
It's
funny.
crazy. He got drafted by Seattle, but imagine that'd be the most poetic thing ever. If Russell Westbrook got drafted by Seattle, and then it took him 15 years to get there, but then he finishes his career in Seattle.
And leads them to a 6 seed, and they upset a team in the first round or something crazy.
They upset Oklahoma City with Shea in the first round. Poetic justice.
That would be funny. Yeah, we need to see an expansion soon because
legitimately,
none of us have seen one. So
right.
It's about time.
If they wanted to spice up the league, if they should have struck at any time, I think they should have struck when the West was way better than the East. because then like maybe once you make that expansion, then like the teams you send over to the East can like be some solid team. I mean, the Pelicans and Grizzlies like weren't great like 5 years ago, but I mean when they were still in like later Conley and Gasol, like later AD, especially that team with like AD and Boogie, like around that time period, like those would have been two solid teams coming over to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. It's inevitable.
It'll happen probably within the next
3 to 5 years, hopefully. Because
Yeah.
I just realized the other day, like,
before you said it, like the NHL is at 32 teams now. Like I was still in the mindset of 30, but they did add a couple teams. I think baseball might still be at 30. I'm not
Correct.
I think MLB is at 30, but MLB's playoffs also has always been more reserved. I think MLB playoffs might be at like 7 now, but for the longest time, MLB playoffs were only like the top 5 on each side. So it's like if you expanded the MLB to 32, like then now even a larger percentage of your teams are making the playoffs. But like especially in the NBA where now you have an expanded postseason where like two-thirds of your league is playing some sort of postseason play, like you can afford to do that. Because right now, still only like not even half of the MLB is in the playoffs. Even the NFL, they just expanded to 7 teams a couple years ago as well. And that's 32 teams. It's like you have like a little under half your team, 14 out of 32. Like I think maybe a little under half your teams, like the NBA going to 32 could definitely be acceptable. If you don't even count the play and just the top 8 from each side, 16 out of 32 and exactly half is like, I think a good balance.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely the talent in the league to do it right now. That's not of concern. I mean, there's every time that there's guys that go down with injury or get a new opportunity, there's always guys that sprout up and show that they're ready for a bigger role. So obviously it might take some years for the talent to get over to the new teams, but there's definitely the talent to get there. And I would imagine the markets are probably there as well. I mean, obviously things didn't work out in Seattle before, but I'd imagine Seattle are good for a team. I mean, the Golden Knights, the NHL team in Vegas have done well. I'd imagine they do well with the team, and I'm sure there's other markets that would do well as well. So I wouldn't be surprised with the TV deal being up in a few years if they try and get a couple of new teams in on the new TV deal, and in 2 or 3 years' time we see a couple of teams jump in.
I think Vegas is the biggest shoe-in of all, because not even just the Golden Knights and their success story, but like the Raiders went there. And while the Raiders, they're not great this season, but like they had a really good story last year, especially one of the nicest stadiums in the league. And like, I'm pretty sure they're doing well financially since moving there. Like, I think they're making pretty good money, but like that market's been super successful since they actually decided to pursue it.
Maybe they should throw a team in Montana or Wyoming or somewhere.
I don't think there's a place to put them, bro. They're gonna be last in attendance because Lakers games probably have higher attendance than the entire population of Montana.
Look, if they weren't getting attendance in Vancouver, Montana's chalked. I might be their only guy driving down for the games, and that ain't a short drive.
That would be funny.
They're gonna get what the Saskatchewan Sparrow. I don't even know what's a random. What's like the Sharks? The Saskatchewan Sharks. I'm just thinking of S names, but like I don't know anything in Saskatchewan. You would know better than me. Something that you can
Anything
have.
S? I'm trying to think of a type of fish, but I don't know.
Because you guys have all the lakes, right?
Yeah, we got a ton of lakes. I don't know.
The Saskatchewan Lakers. The Saskatchewan Lakers. You have
my club basketball team was called the PA Lakers, so that was our team. Very ununique, but here we are.
Let Dave be the GM. That'd be great. No time, man.